Very good.
Hello. All right. Welcome. I'm Kelly Matthews, and today I have with me Dr. Nika Spaulding. And I say doctor on purpose because this little conversation is part of a series where we're exploring the Doctor of Ministry program. So, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here, Kelly. It's always fun. It's always weird to hear doctor too. And so,
I
yeah.
agree. Our mutual friend Rebecca really likes to throw it around. So anytime I'm on the air with her or in person, she's all after it. It's so cute.
That's hilarious.
So both of us are kind of new to the title.
Yep.
And both of us ended up with doctor of ministry programs at different schools. So I'm going to let Nika do a little introduction of herself. Just what drew you to pursue that kind of program?
Yeah. My favorite thing in the world is being an aunt. And so I knew when I finished my master's all those years ago at Dallas Theological that I wasn't done. Like I knew I love school, there's more to learn. So I always sort of thought a PhD was going to be the route I take because I love the cerebral study, but I want to be a present aunt, and PhDs can just feel really all consuming. And I was a pastor. So I was a full-time pastor. So it's like something's got to give, and I can't give on pastoring. So then I'm like, am I
Mhm.
not going to be able to be as present as an aunt? I didn't want to do that. And for a long time, the DMin programs, I don't know if Kelly, if this was your experience, but they always felt like the options were like really niche focused on a type of ministry. And I didn't want to take a preaching doctorate of ministry. I wasn't doing women's ministry. So I know there's a lot of women's ministry ones. So
Mhm.
for me, for a long time, I didn't even consider a doctorate of ministry because I just didn't find one that I felt like made sense for my career until one day I was Googling Scott McKnight and saw that he had a doctorate of ministry at Northern.
Mhm.
And he is a theologian, author, human that I just esteem so highly from at that point from a distance, from his books
Yeah.
and all of that. And so that's really what triggered it was just the Lord's providence one day causing me to Google because I was looking to see if he had anything new going on in his life. And so what made the difference is the doctrine of ministry at Northern is in New Testament context. So
Mhm.
it's less like pastorally based and more so just contextually based. And that for me was like, I kind of maybe this is how you feel about yours. It's sort of PhD light in the sense of less languages, but the kind of content you do in a PhD work, like a focused, narrowed research topic, which for us
Mhm.
was mostly Judaism in the background of the New Testament. And so that's because yours with the church history, it's not how to minister to women. It's like, how do you look at history and women, all that. So that's what drew me to the program.
Okay. Yeah, that was part of my attraction to it was that it wasn't again, similar. I wanted PhD, but my life circumstances did not allow for that with 4 kids at home and, I was not the breadwinner. We couldn't just uproot, that sort of thing. But it was my 50th birthday present to myself to be like,
That's
"I'm gonna go
awesome.
back to school because I graduated with that THM when I was in my 20s, so it's been a long time.
Hmm.
So, yeah, but I wanted something that was, more research, so I would never say, "Oh, it's just like a PhD," because it's not.
No, yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so that is a point of, I think, confusion for a lot of people that when they hear doctorate, they assume PhD, and I have to always go, "Let me stop you," right there. I don't
yeah.
wanna
The problem
sound
is though, is
more.
ours is a demon, and then when you just say demon or
Oh,
when there's
yes.
transcripts made, they
Yeah.
think like
Oh, yeah, yeah.
DEMON. So yeah, that's really
Absolutely,
confusing.
yes,
Yeah.
and so we'll see if this one I don't even know if Substack does, well, they do on
Yep.
lives, they do, so we shall see how this works out. Demon, but yes, around this house, that's a favorite, "Mom got her demon," that kinda thing. Yes. So, but what I did appreciate about my program was that it allowed me to go into research mode if I wanted to, but
Yeah.
it was flexible enough that not everybody had to do that, so yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so that's what drew you there, but you said that you were pastoring. The big question I get is, "What are you gonna do with it?" Okay, like I'm 12, or 18. So, it's like, I guess we always ask that question of ourselves, "What are we gonna do when we grow up?"
Yeah.
Did your doctorate, improve, change? How did it impact the ministry that you did or are doing?
Yeah. So kind of bifurcate. By the time I graduated, I actually had stepped out of ministry. But while I was in ministry, so I was the resident theologian at the church that I was at. So my main responsibilities included preaching on Sundays and doing the liturgy and all of that. So that requires obviously study and formation, but I also taught midweek theological classes. So that I saw it every week. Like people would ask a question, I'd be like, I just read a book on that. It's funny that you asked that. And so
Yeah.
I think with any theological education, with the particular role that I had, it just kept, it sort of built this like scaffolding of information that made it easier to pull knowledge or to prepare talks or to prepare messages. And we built whole classes around, subjects I might be taking. So I remember our class, our students were super interested in what the early church was like, which was what I was studying. So we did, an 8-week study, and then we ended it with, I brought everybody to my house. I dressed up like a Roman centurion, which is very like, there are no female Roman centurions, but it's my home. So I did whatever I want. And then I
Make
assigned
it roll.
everybody, I assigned everybody roles. And the roles were sort of like Jewish, father, household like this, Gentile, previously pagan, just now accepted Jesus, right? Sort of all these things, house slave, and sort of things
Yeah.
that are really give you a worldview that allowed you. And so then I read a letter from Paul, and it was really just a mishmash of different things Paul had said to different these
Mhm.
churches. And I would read a line, I'd go, stop. All right, how do you feel? And you're embodying, this place and space and all that. And it was so fun.
That's amazing.
Because
What a great
and
experiment.
yeah, and people would be like, one lady was like, I'm kind of ticked right now at him, and points across after, Paul is saying
Uh-huh.
something about
Yeah.
freedom and all these things. And so like, I remember I assigned somebody like 2 wives to one person. And so I just said, you have another wife, by the way. Like, I didn't make anybody
You
play
didn't
that.
make 2 people. Okay.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a little weird, but it was a husband and a wife, and I was like, by the way, you have another wife who's not here, but pretend she's here. And I remember talking about, some of the passages where you like, honor your wife as your son and all that, so it was really enlivening. So one, the doctorate of ministry played into that. And we'll probably talk later about my doctoral project, which also hugely impacted the ministry I do. But I have since I've actually transitioned in my life to doing more theological writing, editorial work.
Mhm.
And that is where what I actually do now is I create theological
Yay.
products. Yeah.
Okay, one at a time. Show one and
Yeah,
then show the
so these are
other.
called, the whole series that I'm building toward is called Theology in 10. And I really believe part of God's unique wiring for me is I make the complex simple. And I've been doing this my whole life. Like, I tutored high school math and science all through my master's to pay for my master's. And so I like taking really complex things and being like, how would I explain this to my niece? How would I explain this to my mom?
Mhm.
And so I decided, okay, could I boil down the whole Trinity the whole Trinity into 10 pages? And I decided, I think I can. Obviously, it's not comprehensive, but what this is it's a Trinity at a glance, where I boil down 2,000 years of church history, thousands of pages of reading into what I believe is a helpful resource. So we did this one first by my room. I'm nowhere without my roommates. One of them's the graphic designer. One of them, if you've ever bought one of these from me and you're like, wow, Nika has beautiful handwriting. No, I do not. That is my roommate, Alex, who is addressed in the
Okay.
envelope.
Love
And
it.
then I just hot off the press is the
Yeah.
Essentials of the Faith, which Kelly edited for me. So
I
I'm super
proofread it,
grateful.
like, I just made sure she had her
You
commas in the
edited
right
it,
place. So, yeah.
which are important. And
Yes,
so,
they are.
yeah. So I talk about like, what are the essentials? And the goal for the Trinity was, I really do believe with the right understanding of God, you can really then begin to understand God's love for you. I think of Paul's prayer to the Ephesians, where he's like, I really want you to know the love of, like you to know that you are loved by God. And that's a driving force in my life. The Essentials is a timely one, because I see a lot of division and vitriol over things that I'm like, those, you're allowed to disagree on those things. Like,
Yeah.
that Christians have always kind of disagreed on those things. So I wrote this one with strategy involved of like, maybe if we knew what the essentials were and we rallied around those, we could see the kind of unity that Jesus is calling us to in his, high priestly prayer of like, let them be one as the Father and I are one. And so that's some of how I use my degree now, is I create theological resources for folks to encounter what I believe is a God of infinite love and goodness. Like, I just believe in my bones, God loves us. And part of like, what am I going to do with my degree? Like, that question is like, I'm going to fall more in love with God is really the answer. And
Mhm.
so I think about that of like, it was an expensive hobby. Like, I mean, I don't know that I need
Okay,
a
okay.
reason.
I think it's a little more than that. Yes,
But I'm saying, like, even if it didn't result in sort
Mhm.
of, I think because of God's goodness, it does result in good of others, because that's how God works. But what it resulted in for me was a deepening relationship with the Lord, and that is an inherent good. So
Yes.
that's what I mean by an expensive hobby is like when people go
Yeah.
golf, I'm like, you're not going to make it on the PGA, but there's an inherent good for your mental and physical health as you do. Maybe not your mental health. Golf seems to be a humbling sport, but
Who look, just last weekend, my one of my boys drove down for Easter and took us to the golfing range, and I confess, that's probably the one sport I've never tried. I used
Mm,
to play softball, so I
yeah,
can hit, or I could, but I was
very
like, "Oh,
different
I'm"
swings though. Very different.
exactly, and so
Yeah.
they were like, "Well, here you go, mom, let's see it." And it was really fun, but I could totally now I understand a little better how it is all consuming. But that's a rabbit trail. So,
Yeah.
what you said about, you fell more in love with God through this program, to me, that's a really great goal, and
Yeah.
maybe a marker of a good program.
Yeah.
Just that it isn't all head knowledge. It isn't all work, 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 read all these books and no more, although that is important.
Mhm.
But it pulls you in different ways into a relationship with the Lord in just a different way,
Yeah.
hopefully deeper. So let me
Well,
think.
I think I wanna say that to anybody listening, I actually think that is a critical goal, and the reason why I say that is in my master's, I was trying to actually do that master, like master information. I had a zoology degree, so I
Mhm.
didn't know come from siccum is what I like to say to people. Like I came in knowing mitosis and meiosis. I didn't like
Right.
at DTS, you have to take like this preliminary theological
Oh
exam. I'm
my, I
pretty sure I
remember that.
failed it. Yeah, I was like, I don't know any of this, like nothing. And I didn't grow
Big
up in the
words.
church. Yeah,
Mhm.
so I didn't I mean, like, when I tell you, like, I couldn't have told you the order of the biblical books when I showed up on DTS's
Mhm.
campus. I can now. But
I
I
still
really
get mixed
was
up in the prophets, so go ahead.
yeah, fair enough. I have a deck of cards for that to help you,
That's
but,
right, you do.
I do, yeah. But I felt like, I really was trying to master the information. When you go on to your PhD and your doctorate in ministry or just like as you grow, you really want to major in the profs too. Because what you do want is not only to be shaped by the information, but these are people that you are almost unintentionally, but at times, hopefully, you're intentionally choosing. They are going to shape you. They're going to shape
Mhm.
how you encounter the scriptures and how you encounter God. And so, like, Scott McKnight and EJ Gupta and Lynn Cohick for me are people that I want to grow up to be like. And so
Mhm.
that is part of the
Mhm.
doctoral program and part of why I can give credit to growing in love of the Lord is because I chose a program not simply because of the knowledge, but it started because I wanted to be near Scott. And
Right.
being near Scott has a net positive impact on everybody. So yeah.
Agreed. And so just for listeners who are thinking through programs, it is, critical as a PhD student that you are, not only thinking in terms of topic, but specifically a professor
Yeah.
that you want to study under. So even if they move schools, sometimes you move with them. It's really wild, and you hope that that doesn't happen while you're,
Do you know
studying
about
with them.
that personally? And, like,
I
is
have
that something
friends, yeah,
yeah.
so
I was gonna
and
say, we
and
know
yes,
people that are doing
but
yeah.
that and yeah, I'll get to that. But at DMin, that's not the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
It was kind of a new thought even for me when I was looking through which program to start. There was a PhD program that I could have done, remotely, kind of like the DMin. So that one was the only option I had, and so I was looking there, and then, I was introduced to Lynn Cohick, who was about to start a program. And I was like, oh, the topic sounded really interesting and kind of fit what, some of my interests. And so once I had those two to choose from, I had got some really great, wise advice
Yeah.
of who are you, like, who is this
Yeah.
person? I would go with her, like,
Yeah.
go with the person, because the topic also fits with whatever, because it's a mentoring relationship as well. So very, possible to do that in a DBIN program just as much as you would in a PhD.
Yeah.
So why probably the answer is Scott, but why was this a good fit for you? Is that the right
Yeah.
answer?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, the Scott is a big part of it. I mean, he has a way of viewing the scriptures and Jesus that is like something I desire in my life and
Mhm.
I'm grateful for. Like I was still pastoring when I read his book, Pastor Paul, and I read it, I immediately finished it and read it again. because his way of like seeing that vocation, like, there's just so much about Scott that I want to be like. But really, one of the reasons though is I, in my master's program, was a New Testament major, and for me, there's so many things you can focus on in the world of biblical studies. You can be somebody who drills down on like the Bible side, you can theology side, you can do whatever. I have always had an interest in the Greco-Roman world. My master's thesis was on sport in the ancient world, which is very Greco-Roman. I'm named after Nike, for crying out loud, which is Greco-Roman goddess of victory. Like, it's a natural, like, dovetail.
And you're an athlete.
Yeah. It all makes perfect sense. However, the deeper I was studying, the more I'm realizing, there is a lot about the Greco-Roman world that helps us understand the New Testament. There's so much about Judaism and first century Judaism that I just didn't know, because all my focus was Greco-Roman, that I began to feel gaps in my education. And when you're beginning to study Judaism, that is a topic that if you hook your wagon to the wrong person, you may end up in some wonky views about first century Judaism. And so I wanted a trusted guide to close the gaps there. And Scott is that. Scott is widely viewed as somebody who's an expert that you can trust in those things. So I learned more about Pharisees. I have a take on Pharisees that the average evangelical would be like, I think of them as the bad guys. And I'm like, yeah, I don't. And so like, there's a lot about first century Jewish culture, practices, religious thought that helps me now go, oh, now I read the Gospels and the New Testament letters in a much more full understanding. And so that for me is part of why I needed to counterbalance all the Greco-Roman side. Because listen, you'll find Nike wherever you want. You know what I mean? Like, you can read a New Testament letter and be like, that's because of X. And then if you read some more about Jewish thought life, you go, oh, but you know what? What's also undergirding that is this. And so that's part of why it worked really well for me. I also just like the city of Chicago, so that was nice.
This is true. Yeah. I did start at Northern and enjoyed my 2 trips up there.
Especially in the summers, because it's hot here in Texas. So
yes. And then I transitioned to Houston, and it's real hot.
You went from hot to hotter by going.
Oh my word! I know. So tell us about your actual dissertation. What was your research and why?
Yeah, so I wanted to go full nerd. Like, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, right. I was like, I'm gonna do the scribal reading habits and writing habits of the first century, because I think Christians should read more. So if I write a dissertation on the communal reading habits during the time of Jesus, which is what I did a ton of my research on while I was doing the doctoral program. Like, every time you get, a new class, I'd be like, you can kind of write on whatever you want if it's adjacent to what we've been studying. And I would find a way to insert communal reading habits. I was like, so ridiculous. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And then I realized I will impact about 4 people, like, it was sort of one of those things that I thought, oh, this is full nerd. I love it. But I had this desire I knew I was transitioning out of my job as a pastor, and I had this desire to leave them better than not that I was leaving them bad, but to leave them with something that I felt like a gift to that group of people, and something that I could keep reduplicating as a tool to help the local church. And so what that led me to was, I've been discipling people for 20 years. And so the question I always get from folks is, hey, this young gal asked me to disciple her. What do I do? And I always am like, well, why did she ask you to disciple her? And then immediately they go, I don't know. And I'm like, well, what's she wrestling through? I don't know. And well, what are her challenges? I don't know. And I'm like, well, I'd start there. Like, that's the number one. And so what I realized was, what if I created a resource to help people in the discipleship process that revolves around really good questions? And my inspiration for that was, of course, Jesus. When you look at Jesus, he asks over 300 questions. He is asked about 180, and he directly answers like 3.
Yeah.
And so, but when you think about the average,
frustrating.
No, I know. I joke all the time that I'm like, this is my impression of Jesus. Like, hey, Jesus, do you want ketchup on your burger? And he's like, does God make the sun shine on the tomato vines? And he's like, I don't know, man. Do you want ketchup on your burger? Like, which is that's not fair to Jesus, but it caused me to go, okay, knowing all that I know about first century Greco-Roman rhetoric, and what I've now learned about Jewish rhetoric, is Jesus asking questions because that's unique to Jesus, or is there something powerful about the practice of asking questions? So that's what I set out to ask and answer. And it turned out to be this really beautiful project where it worked really well. And what I discovered was this is something we see in Jewish culture. This is something we see in Greco-Roman culture, but I joke that he gets it from his dad, and I don't mean Joseph. And so if
Right.
you look at all of the Bible, starting with the first words of God after he creates, he's like, where are you? And an infinitely
Mhm.
omniscient, all-knowing God is not asking something because he doesn't
'Cause he
know.
doesn't know the
Yeah.
answer, right?
And so there's questions do things to us. And so as I was doing the research, I was like, okay, what if I created 45 questions that sort of revolve around God's identity, your perception of God's identity, your perception of yourself, and your perception of your neighbor? And what I discovered is just having those questions had a net positive good on people. And if you think about the average discipleship material that you think about, a lot of it is like giving you information because we think the problem is if you have the right info, you'll do the right thing. And that's not necessarily a bad, I mean, there's some truth to that. We need to teach people their Bible. I think any discipleship program should have, Jesus teaches too. Like he's not
Yeah.
just asking questions. He's not Plato. But I don't think we spend enough time asking questions. And without people evaluating and interrogating their own views or having the chance to say out loud, I got to be honest with you, I think God's mad at me most of the time, right? I mean, you have to have moments where you have this examined life. And that's what I discovered the questions did. And so it turned out it was Kelly, what it's like when you create these doctoral things and you think, I hope I'm onto something here. Like this
Yeah.
whole thing could flop. And then I got to basically write my dissertation being like, thought I had something cool. Turns out Jesus is great at asking questions, but questions don't do jack diddly for people. But that's not what happened. I saw massive people got to self-report sort of their improvement of their view of God, themselves, and others. And every single person improved that went through the program. Like they had a little bit better view of God, a little
Okay.
bit better view of themselves. Yeah.
Back up. So as part of your research, you created a questionnaire, a program?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
happened?
So they started with a questionnaire. So they start with 1 through 7, like strongly disagree all the way up to strongly agree and everything in between. God loves me. God likes me. Questions like this, like, where are you at on this? I know myself and how God's wired me. I know my spiritual gifts. I know my neighbors. I know how to care for my neighbors. Statements like this, and they've got to mark it. And then they're handed 45 questions and they have 2 months to go through it. And here's the kicker. I used neuroscience to stack the deck. There's a neuroscience that partnered with a discipleship pastor and they wrote a book. It's called Half the Church. Sounds like it's going to be a book about women, but it's not. It's about your brain. And they argue in the book, in order for people to truly change, you have to have an environment where they feel attachment, which means they don't feel like their relationship's in jeopardy. So Kelly, if every time you come to me, you're like, if I say this, Nika will stop being my friend, that's not an environment for growth. So you have to feel like, hey, our relationship's strong enough that if I'm like, hey, I think your dog's ugly, like I'm not going to just walk out on the friendship.
You're
We're
out,
going to work
lady.
through it. Yeah, we're going to work through it. It's going to be bumpy, but we'll work through it. So attachment. And then the second piece is joy. And the way they define joy is like delight in seeing you that's expressed most often through the face. And they were like, you sort of have to have this relationship in order for growth to happen. So I stacked the deck. So let me give all the caveats here. Do I think you could just ask the stranger on the bus these questions and it would result in as good of a result? No. Okay. But if you found yourself in the context with someone who loves you and enjoys you, then these questions will work. So then they had to pick a partner that met that 2 criteria. And then they just, however they wanted to ask the questions, they want to sit down and do 15 at a time. If they want to call each other, if they want to do it, however. And I saw
they did it in pairs.
They did in pairs. And I saw every iteration of this. One couple asked all 45 on a very long road trip. And I was like, that is not how I would have done it. I had some folks and they met at my house. One of them was my roommate and her friend Tashara came over and said, it was so cute. I'd see them in the backyard with their little coffee cups. I'm like, oh, they're doing my doctoral work over there. And so they would do like 3 questions and they would meet like every couple of days. I had folks who were like, we just did one every day. We just kept the questions on our dining room table. And so and we just would wake up and we would do it every day. And so, because if you do it as like a couple, I feel like that's a little bit easier. Friends are a little bit more, you gotta plan that out. But I saw people, just however they wanted to do it. I didn't set any parameters around that. And so after 60 days, they came back and then they took that survey that they did in the beginning again. And that's how I know, like, God loves me. They'd go from like neutral to agree, or they go from agree to or
Mhm.
some would agree to agree,
More
or,
agree.
however. And that was what was like wild to me. And because they didn't see their initial answers and it had been 2 months, like
Okay. Yeah.
and so, and then we sat around and I said, okay, let's talk about this experience. What was it like? And that was, that's really where you find out, did this
Okay.
work?
Okay.
And
So, all right. How did you get to the final form?
yeah, what do you mean the final form?
Like, what did it like if somebody says, I want to read your paper, what is
Yeah.
that? What does it look like?
Yeah, they're gonna send me $100 and I'm gonna send them a PDF. No. The final form is they're gonna get an intro chapter about why this matters to me.
Mhm.
They're gonna get a bunch of research on Greco-Roman and ancient literary resources because they
Oh,
have to
so
do some
that part got
research.
in there. Good.
Oh
Mhm.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. They're gonna get chapters on biblical questions, and then they're gonna get chapter on discipleship because ultimately this is what I believe discipleship is meant to do is it's identity formation. And it's identity formation about asking, answering who is God, who am I, who are others. So you're gonna get this like heavy research, then leads me to a quick description of the experiment.
Mhm.
And then of course all the appendices which have the questions, the format and
Okay,
all
so all that's
that
at the
stuff.
end, but
Yep.
you'll
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
And then
meat
the
part.
results. Yeah, and then the
Okay.
results. And what my hope is with the results is pretty aspirational. And here's where at the end of the day we started this conversation by me saying the most important thing in the world to me is being an aunt. And it is. And really my hope here in all of this, Kelly, is I didn't grow up in the church. I have a science background. Science background questions are how you do anything. Like
Mhm.
you question everything, and that's how you
Hypotheses.
find the truth. Yeah. And then I got into church cultures where questions made me annoying or suspicious, or I've even had people tell me I just lack faith. Like if I had more faith, I wouldn't ask so many questions. And thankfully, my mom raised me to be a fairly confident individual. So I'm like, nah, I don't think I'm the problem. But I know from people that they heard that from pastors
Mhm.
and they really think like, and I'm going, if in our faith we can't ask questions, where, like, what? This is, we're
How is it
asking
faith?
people, it's
Yeah.
not, we're asking people to bet their eternity on a man that died and rose again. Like, if it's not true, we are lunatics, right? I mean, like C.S. Lewis
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
I think questions are the bedrock of healthy faith. I think they're vital. And so part of what my conclusion comes to is I really want to create curiosity cultures in local spaces. And if I can create data that shows like it's an inherent good to
Mhm.
ask questions, and that hopefully will shift some people into a direction where questions are welcomed, encouraged, and seen as a normative, formative part of the discipleship experience because Jesus does it. Like it's not even because I like literally
Right.
like Jesus did this.
Yeah.
But in order for me to say do it like Jesus did a lot of things we can't do,
Yeah.
so the data
But
has to be there to say that we can do this. And if
this
you
is one
do
of
it,
those. Yeah.
yeah, this works. We know this
Mhm.
works. And so I need to do it like if I really want to take it mainstream though, because I did it on about 24 people.
Yeah.
So I need to do it on like 2,000, but
Mhm.
that's for another day and another project.
Sounds like a book in the making is what it sounds
I
like.
Yeah, I think so. I don't tell
Mhm.
Mary DeMuth, but someday I'll get that proposal
I
over
don't
to
know, you're
her.
going public here at some
Yeah.
point. This
Well,
will
I
be
do
out
I
there.
do wanna yeah, I wanna send it over to her and I wanna get it published.
Good.
With any dissertation, you write it and you write it to get your degree, and then you gotta write it for, like, the, trade book. So
Yeah.
it needs work, which is like,
Same,
yeah, you
same.
get it. You get
Lots
it.
of work. Yes, I
Yeah.
do. But good, I'm glad to hear that at some point, the plan is to release it in an accessible format. In the meantime, would you say that the primary audience is pastors or any kind of church leader?
Yeah. I actually think the primary audience is moms, dads, and grandparents, and the reason why is because the
Mhm.
questions are so easy
Okay.
to implement, and so I have the bigger goal of changing pastors. I recognize that pastors have a lot of I've worked for big churches and small churches. And in all of those environments, you have so much pressure and difficulty, and you're trying to teach one to the thousands, sometimes one to the hundreds. And I actually think this is your pastor's probably not your best choice to be the most vulnerable. But a parent who's sitting in the carpool lane and you have this question and you're like, "Hey guys, when you imagine God looking at you, what do you see looking back at you?
Mhm.
That is so while I want to change the world and I have goals of changing the whole world, Kelly, like I'd love for the
We're here to
Pope,
help. We're here
yeah,
to
the
help.
Pope should read it. Like, so yeah, I would love for a book to have an impact like that. But I think it's your discipleship pastors more than your head pastor. I think it's your
Okay.
small group leader. I think it's your youth group leader, and really I think it's the small group leader who works 40 hours a week as an administrative assistant, but she loves Jesus with all her heart. So she hangs out with 12 eighth graders, and God bless her because, oh my gosh, what a hard age
Middle
to hang
schoolers,
out with.
man. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's doing her best to learn all the, skibbity Ohio language. They have a whole new vocab, and she's
Mhm.
underpaid and overworked, but she loves Jesus. So she shows up every week. And if I can create something for her to say, hey, I know these questions work.
Mhm.
So use this resource to like ask really important questions that can, and hopefully change lives in the process and
This
transform
sounds
people.
this sounds like, a card deck in the making.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
good.
I'm
And we
busy
say
making
that
other card decks, but it is a
okay.
card deck in the
For
making.
those
Yeah,
who
yeah,
don't know, which is probably most everybody here, another one of the products that Nika's been working on in her quest to reach the church with accessible information and processes is literal card decks. The
yeah.
first one uh, was through the Minor Prophets of all things, which
Yep.
I have on my shelf.
That was because
But
I just love the minor prophets, but the
yes,
Jesus deck, the Gospels deck is, and it's improved, I will say, for those of you who are listening and maybe bought a deck, we heard you. So now they do have clubs, spades, hearts, and diamonds on the next deck to make it
okay.
more of like a deck. The other one was color coded for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, and I thought that'd be enough. The irony is I don't see colors super well. And so people have like written in and they're
Okay.
like, I can't tell the difference between the colors. And I'm like, yeah, me neither. So my bad.
All
Uh,
right.
so we're improving it, but we have the Gospels deck is almost done. It's gonna.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it, Kelly. Like it looks cool. It's got some cool theology in it. So imagine you're playing, whatever normal card game you are with your kiddos, and you just happen to like absorb a little bit about the Gospels as you're playing is the idea, or a little bit about the minor prophets.
So you're not creating a game necessarily, but just, items to use while you
Yeah.
play whatever your
Yeah.
card games are.
I give game suggestions because I
Okay.
love card games. Part
Yep.
again goes back to being an aunt. This all was
Yeah,
inspired because I
absolutely.
was playing at ant camp. We do ant camp every summer. I hang out with my babies for a week. We do fun stuff. And
Mhm.
we play this game called Sevens. And we played it, I mean, hundreds of times over 5 days. And I thought, what if I created a deck of cards? And so they're my test people. They're
That's
so
nice.
brutally honest. So in the
Even
minor
better.
prophets, yeah, there's a haiku in the minor prophets for each book. And so like
Okay.
Jonah's is fish food, bad mood, angry dude. Can God love them too? Like a really succinct, quick
Mhm.
way to
Nice.
Jonah. It's like cool, yeah. And so the kids are reading the haikus for each book, and they're like, "Yeah, God's got bars." And I'm like, "Well, your aunt wrote those. This is not from the Bible." And they're like, "Not bad, Aunt Nika, not
Nah,
bad."
there
And
you
I was
go.
like, "I've
Low
arrived.
praise, but I'll take
I've
it.
arrived." So to that end, I have experience making decks, and
Mhm.
so yeah, the 45 questions because I was going to experiment on St. Juder's, my previous church.
Mhm.
The questions are coded toward them a little bit, things that we had talked about over
Mhm.
the previous 8 years that I was the resident theologian. So I need to go back through and think, okay, how would I rephrase this if somebody hadn't taken a Trinitarian class with me?
Yeah.
How would I phrase this? And so
Yeah.
that's some
You
of
got
it.
a lot of
Yeah,
you got a lot of work ahead of you, is what I'm
I
hearing.
I have so many
Plenty.
hobbies, Kelly. Like,
This is
yeah.
okay. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up here, but first, how do people find you and these decks of cards and your books?
Yeah, super
Booklets.
easy. NikaSpaulding.com. And my name is so weird that if you misspell Nika and you misspell Spaulding, I will still be the first thing you see. And so, but
I'll
NikaSpaulding.com.
I'll put it
Yeah.
in the show notes too,
Thanks.
and, any links to whatever you want me to share with them, so,
Yeah.
okay. Well, thanks for sharing about the DMIN program that you went through and the benefits you found from it. What would you tell in closing, what would you tell a woman in particular, because DMIN programs are for men and women, obviously,
Yeah.
but what would you tell a woman who's thinking about higher education and has decided, what is this DMIN thing? Why would I want to pursue that?
Yeah. I have 1,000 things. So, but I'll limit it to 2. So the first objection that I hear from women all the time is I'm too old. So I just want to name that real quick. You're not. I don't care if you're 97 listening to this. Like there is a lifetime pursuit of God that is worthy of your time. And the reason why I think they say that is because they don't have an imagination for what they could do with the degree, which is what we talked about earlier. And I had no idea where my degree would take me when I started it. I thought I knew, and I would argue so many of my friends had no ideas where
Mhm.
they thought, and you don't know. But what it opens you to is one, the collaboration with your classmates. I now work full time for one of my classmates at a great organization that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't met him. And so, one, it opens you up to that sort of rubbing elbows and doing good theological work together. And it teaches you like how other people see the word and see the
Yeah,
Lord. And that is really valuable. But it opens you up to a whole world of scholarship where the
yeah,
possibilities are actually bigger than probably your imagination.
yeah.
And so, young women, especially, we've often been left out of theological instruction, or women in general. I don't mean young women, like all women have been left out of theology. You're like one of the first female students out of DTS, Kelly. Like, that's
I
crazy.
wasn't
Like,
that early, but okay, close.
but it wasn't like, yeah, it was actually. I mean, it hadn't been going on that long. And so
No.
I think this is where I'd say is like, we're at a really special time in the church's history where I see an explosion of brilliant, wonderful, incredible women. And when you sort of enter into that stream, it really opens up doors for you. And so I think about the women that I used to read and I aspired from a distance. And now it's reasonable for me to go to a theological conference and be like, hey, Carmen Imes, Sandy
Yes.
Glahn, Lynn
Yeah.
Cohick, Amy Brown, like who, all these women to be like, hey, I like, what are you studying? What are you reading? What are you? And so that's what I'd say is like, I think if your reservations about it are either your age or I'm not sure what I would do with it, I don't think those are good enough excuses. And so I think you should just sign up and allow the Lord to show you what he might have in store for you down the road. And there's just an inherent good
Mhm.
in doing it. And I get it's cost prohibitive and all those things. So I'm not saying like, hey, just spend
Look
$40,000
into
because
it.
it's good for you. Like I get that. But
Yeah,
also, if you got it and you can do it,
yeah.
you don't yet know what God can do with that degree. And we
Am
need more trained women in the church. We just do.
Amen, and also regarding the cost, there are scholarships, so
Yes.
I am here to testify. So that is not always the issue, and
I'm
don't let it
single,
be the
single
issue.
income, was a pastor
Mhm.
and paid for it in real time. So
Yeah,
there are really affordable places, and
yeah,
again, everybody's financial situation I get that.
yeah.
I'm not
But
like, I know
it's
it's
one of
like
those things.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but,
Yes, ma'am.
like, it just you just can't imagine what God could and might do, and we need professors and pastors and theologians and writers and everything. We need
Mhm.
people writing in their local newspaper, Kelly. We need people doing the work of the Lord that are informed and theologically rich, and so, yeah, get in the game is what I'd say.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks very much. This is, you were actually the first one I've interviewed. I don't know where you're gonna fall
Yeah.
in the lineup when we
Cool.
release these, but, thanks for being the prototype. So this is
Absolutely. This was fun. Kelly, you're good at this.
woo! Well, we'll see how it goes. So appreciate you, and I
Yeah.
will put some of that information, how to find you in the notes.
Awesome. I'm not gonna touch anything on my screen because
Okay.
I'm so nervous that I'll, like, do it and you won't so I'm gonna just let you
I
in this so
I
that I don't actually mess
there's a
anything up.
button at the top left that says "End," and I'm gonna click it, and if you have to do that too, you can.
Perfect. Mine says leave, so I'll let you end, and then
Same
I'll leave if
idea.
it's still there.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thanks, friend. See you
Yeah, of course.
soon. Alrighty.
Bye.
Bye.